Welcome to the interview series, where the mission of this podcast is to add value to as many people as possible. As a realtor, investor, and consumer, I know firsthand there's a lot of information out there and not a lot of time to verify and consume it. So I created this podcast to ensure you have the information, resources, and knowledge to alleviate any stress as it relates to real estate, finances, and more. So with that being said, I'm excited to introduce my friend Chris here. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Jeff. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to discussing with you. First I want to introduce you, right? I want to talk about who you are, what you're about, and then you were nice enough to type up your own bio, so I'm going to read this for you, right? So, Chris Sykes is a principal and advisor with Conusmer Wealth Advisors as an independent registered investment advisor. They provide strategy, tax planning, and investment management to individuals, families, and businesses across the country. Chris is a graduate of the Ohio State University, where he received his bachelor's degree in business administration with a concentration in finance. Mm-hmm. Chris is a certified financial planner and an accredited investment fiduciary. Chris and his wife Sandy have 3 kids and live in Sonoma. In his free time, he enjoys running and the outdoors. Mm-hmm. Awesome, man. 3 kids. Any advice for me? I have one little kid, one daughter. Any?
I got another one on the way too. I don't think I told you that
congrats.
yet. I just found out. Yeah, thank you.
This just in.
Yeah, exactly. It's controlled chaos, man. I don't know. We just do the best we can to provide a good example for them, right?
That's amazing.
They don't come with instructions.
No, not at all. I mean, another one. So you have 3. They're what are the ages?
I got 8, 5, and 2.
8, 5, and 2.
2 girls and a boy.
Okay.
We don't know on the 4th one yet, so we'll find out soon.
Okay, nice.
I'm excited.
You're gonna even it out. I'm thinking it's a boy, so you have 2 and 2.
Yeah.
Even it out. And then are you guys done after that? Are you guys going for 2 or 3 more after that? No?
Well, I don't think so. I don't know.
I love it, man. Well, congrats either way, man. That's
Thank
great.
you.
I did not know that.
Thank you. Yeah.
But yeah, man. So I mean, let's dive into it, huh?
Yes.
First question I have for you. I mean, obviously, financial advisor. How long have you been doing it?
Quite a while. I've I would work for a bank for a long time, and had various roles with them, and I got licensed in 2012, and so just kind of been in various different roles. We started Sonoma Wealth Advisors in 2019, although we've been working with a lot of clients prior to that for quite a while. So. Okay. But it's something I've been interested in since I was a kid. Yeah. You know, it's kind of one of those things.
You know, as a realtor, I think it's important for us to team up, to kind of take some time to discuss how can we help people out there just be in a better position to not only buy homes, but to make sure that they're invested for the short term and also the long term, right? So yeah, I know there are a lot of people out there that some people have financial advisors, some people don't, right? So in your experience, like what percentage of people do you know out there that actually meet with a financial advisor? Mm-hmm.
Well, when you asked me that, I really thought it was very few, honestly. According to the numbers that I found, though, it's about 1 in 3. Okay. So, which is actually a lot higher than I thought. It kind of ties to another question that we had, which is how many people are paycheck to paycheck, right? And when you look at that side of the coin, it's about 2 in 3 people are living paycheck to paycheck. So I guess when you kind of combine those statistics together, it looks like that 1 out of 3 is working with an advisor, trying to manage their funds, and 2 out of 3 are just trying to stay alive, basically.
Yeah. We'll definitely dive into all of those numbers and kind of why, and also how we can improve those numbers, right? Yeah. I think that's what we're here to do. Yeah. I think first thing is for those that about 33-ish% of people have an advisor, financial advisor,
or have met with one.
Met with one. Doesn't mean they have one.
Right.
One initial meeting and I'm out.
Yes.
So that doesn't even really bring in the consistency of it. So that means about 67% of people don't have one or have not met with one. So
right.
What are the negative implications of not having a financial advisor in your experience?
Mm-hmm. You know, I think the biggest thing is you just don't know what you don't know. I mean, it's a very complicated space when you take into account, all the different accounts, Roth, traditional, IRA, 401ks. What are all these numbers? What are the tax implications that I should think about? Those types of things. And so, and I should mention too, we're just talking generally here. This is not like specific to anybody. You should talk to your own advisor about your specific situation. But for a lot of folks, it can get really overwhelming. You know, it's think of a first-time home buyer. There's so much that they just don't know, and I know when I went through that experience first, I really liked having my hand held by the real estate agent that I was working with to kind of walk me through the steps. And I think that's the big key with working with an advisor too, is they can be there to guide you along the way. As you have kids, you change jobs, you buy homes, you sell businesses, all these different things that come up.
Yeah. I mean, the ebbs and flows of life. I mean, things happen. Creating a plan, being flexible within that plan. I can only imagine, right? The things that you help people with, and what the amount of people that you can help that aren't or have never met with a financial advisor. So I think there's more pros and cons, right, of having one. So, what if someone were to meet with you and they were to ask you, like, because obviously they're going to approach you, and they are overwhelmed. They have a lot of life going on. They don't really know what they don't know, and so what would you say if they asked you what is your investment philosophy?
So, and we do get asked that question a lot when it comes to investment philosophy. I think it's very personalized to the client, of course. You know, if you've got someone who's 20 years old and starting out in work and they've got a long runway until they're in retirement, that's a different likely set of circumstances than someone that's like at or near retirement. Everybody's got different goals, but I would say in general, the keys are long-term, stay diversified. You know, nothing too crazy. You don't want to invest what you can't afford to lose, right? You know, that's a good thing, I think. And don't invest in things you don't understand, right? So, I think it's really less about finding the perfect investment and more about investing, being consistent, learning as you go about the things that you don't know, right? And just over time building that snowball. The people that I've seen be successful focus on their savings, focus on getting money into the accounts, and less about, what specific thing am I putting it into at the end of the day, right? Yeah. The great thing about now is that we have so many good options when it comes to investing that weren't available 15, 20 years ago. Low cost options, transparent options, and so the investor really has a lot more advantages than they've ever had in history, really.
You mentioned understanding, and I think there's just so much when it comes to investing, whether it's like mutual funds, growth stock mutual funds. I only know a little bit about that because I've listened to Dave Ramsey.
Yes.
And I've met with you a few times. But for those that, or even for me, how do you help with someone that doesn't understand any of that? Like what is your role in their understanding that?
Sure. That's a great question. I really try to take an educator's approach, like trying to teach, the person at where they are. I like to draw a lot. I learned from my business partner. We take a piece of paper with the client, we draw upside down. It took me a while to kind of like reverse my brain, but drawing pictures helps a lot, right? Because we're mostly visual. Like we're humans, we like stories and we like pictures, right? So trying to take this technical, investment knowledge and make it in a way that you can understand. Because at the end of the day, if it's too complicated where you can't make it fairly simple for the person, probably shouldn't be investing in that anyway.
Yeah. And I'll have to preface this by saying I don't know what I'm talking about, so everything I'm about to say right now is just my interpretation of what the facts are.
Yeah.
But when I've sat with you before, whether in person or in Zoom, it was really good for me to like kind of look at let's just see the mutual, or just a fund, right? An index fund, mutual fund, and then look at the track record of that mutual fund. So I remember walking this through with you. I think it was via Zoom, and we were looking at there's multiple index funds in a row, and we would look at, how it performed over the 5-year, 10-year, and I want to say 20-year.
Yeah. And
really what that rate of return was, and based off of that rate of return, you can, project what it potentially would be over the course of into the future.
Sure.
Right. And so I think going in, I didn't understand that. Right. I don't know what this fund's about, but like now in its infancy of knowledge, I understand how you can look at any fund and just look at the track record of the success, and then if it's down over the last 20 years, probably not want to invest in that fund unless you want to. You're a higher risk at that, right? And then if it has performed well. that's a key indicator that it should perform or might perform well in the future. So that was really helpful for me, sitting down with you. So I just want to thank you for that. And you're right. So there are ways to sit down with someone, walk into a discussion, and then walk out with some knowledge you didn't have before.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for saying that. I think, history is no predictor of the future. Of course, that's like actually one of the things that they even put on every investment. It doesn't. Yeah. It's, no, but just like if you were looking for a house, you look at a neighborhood, what are the schools like? What do the other houses look like? What's the average income or those types of things? You can do that kind of work on a fund as well, to kind of get an idea of what you're investing in, right? And I think growth is important, of course, but the part that gets missed a lot is what has this fund done when it's done poorly in the past? What does it look like during a recession? What kind of roller coaster ride am I getting on? And what should I expect? What's normal? Because even good investments can go through down cycles where you might, half of the money you invested could be gone, right? Temporarily, of course, we hope, but it's not something that everybody knows going in, so we try to educate, like, here's what it's done in the past in terms of risk and what you should kind of expect.
Yeah, and so that's the investment start, and we could spend hours talking about investments, but I think transitioning to debt, like what's the average monthly car payment in America? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, well, this one hit a little close to home. Cars are my, ever since I was a kid, I love cars, and so I understand those out there that are like, man, I gotta have that nice car, right? Mm-hmm. But the average car payment in the U.S. is about $700 a month, and the term is almost 6 years. 69 months is the average term. And so, when you look around and you see all these big SUVs and nice cars, and you think, wow, that must be expensive. It is, right? Yeah. And it takes a lot of the monthly income for most people.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I asked you that question simply because I think the premise and the purpose of this podcast is, and just conversation, is to how can we help those, increase their purchasing power.
Sure.
Right. So I think debt is the first thing to tackle. And so if you're looking at car payments at around $700 a month, and you're looking at mortgages that are X amount, right?
Yep.
Before you say that's expensive, let's kind of maybe tackle the things that are within our control, and then go back and look at that to see if it is actually affordable, right?
Yeah. At a basic level, I think it's important when you're there's good debt and bad debt, right? And what does that mean? Well, if you're gonna buy something using someone else's money and borrowed money, you can put that into something that's going to go down in value, something that depreciates in value. And I don't care how sweet of a car it is, most of the time, as soon as you drive it off the lot, it's worth less, right? I just was in a car accident a few weeks ago, right? Got rear-ended, great car, now worth less, And so you're borrowing money on something that's going down in value versus a house, which they've gone down in value too. Anybody that was around in 2008 knows that. But over time, they've historically held their value, gone up in value, right? So you want to, if you're going to borrow, I think you've got a better probability of success if you're borrowing to buy something that's going to hold its value or go up over time, rather than something that's sinking in value through no fault of your own.
So interesting perspective, and the first thing that popped in my head is a showing that I did yesterday. A lovely couple. We went to Cloverdale yesterday, and we were showing a home, and just looking at the stats as we're walking through, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, nice house, and I just didn't ask, but I looked to see what year it was built. It was built in 1949. So when you're talking about a car that was made in 1949 versus a house that was built in what holds its value?
Right.
And you're talking about just generational wealth, right? Because that was a long time ago, right? You think about over time. There's no contest, right? So one's a liability, one's an asset, and it just made me think about that. So I was like, man, 1949. I don't know what type of cars are around now still, and how much are they worth?
Yeah,
right. Versus houses that are still being shown at a high value and whatnot. So
it's a great example. And how many times have you heard someone say, "I bought a house back in 1980." And then you never hear them say, and it didn't work out, right? It's usually followed by, and now it's worth, X, Y, Z. So
exactly. So my goal is like, let's get you in these houses, but at the same time, I want to make sure anyone that's getting in a house is in a situation that is, going to be successful for them, right?
Yeah.
So where they're not, they're not entering into it, in a risky way, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's the car debt. What about credit card debt? What's the average monthly credit card debt that the American has?
Yeah, so the average balance is around $5,000, $5,200, and the average payment for someone in Gen X, that's got, kids and cars and houses and such, is about $220 a month, which is actually not as bad as you would think. And I think we get kind of overwhelmed with this negative news about the younger generations and such, but in my experience, the younger generations are doing very well handling their finances, and they're probably better off. We as a society in general actually have pretty low debt compared to where we have historically. And so I think that credit card debt, that average number is deceiving. Like if Bill Gates was in the room, our average wealth would be pretty high, right? But I'm sure it'd be concentrated in one area. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's the way it is with the credit card debt. I think there's a few people, a certain segment of the population that has a lot, and I think a big part of being financially successful is recognizing that about yourself. Like, are you a spender? Are you a natural saver? If you have a problem with credit cards, then you have to figure out a way to help yourself with that, right? And maybe that means not having credit cards in order to get yourself in a better position. And so, but interest can work in your favor, like we were talking about with the house. Buying the house in 1980, you just let that compound year after year. It can also work against you in the case of a credit card debt when you've got 15, 20, 30% interest working against you. That's tough, right? And you gotta take action to do something about that if you want to get out of that.
Yeah, and I shout out to my guy Dave Ramsey. I think he says 80% finances are 80%. What does he say? Finances are 80% head knowledge, 80% behaviors and 20% head knowledge, right?
Yes.
So I think if you think about that, I don't know where he got the statistics,
right?
But ultimately, I think that's an interesting perspective where it's like it's all behavior based.
Yeah.
It's what can you control, and then once you control your spending habits in a positive way, then you can then invest correctly. You can put the money where it needs to be and have a successful portfolio.
Absolutely. I think it's, rather than get overwhelmed with where everything is, take one step at a time. If you track your spending, that's the biggest thing, right? Don't make any judgments about it at first. Just track it over a few months. See where your money's going. I think you'd be surprised. A lot of it goes out the door in little amounts, just over and over and over. And so tracking your net worth monthly, I encourage people to do that you start to see what's going on with your finances, and that's really the first step. And then beyond that, then you can come up with a plan and processes, because I'm about goals. I have all my goals written down. I think goals are great, but I think it's so much more important to come up with your process on how you're going to get there, and then you execute on the process, because that's what you have control over. You don't have control over the results. They're going to come and go in random ways, but the process is really where it's at, and so whether that's automating your payments, making sure that you've got all your minimum payments taken care of, and that you're focusing on one debt at a time, but really just having that so it's easy, because anything that's hard, you're probably not going to stick with it. And keep it simple.
Yeah, I think it's really important. I'm an ex-athlete, played basketball. My goal is to make it to the NBA. I do CrossFit, right? I want to be in really good shape. At the end of the day, whether I want to make it to the NBA or be in this crazy shape, like that's almost a destination.
Yeah.
And I think it's human nature to want to fall in line with that and want to skip the steps and not fall in love with the process. Because, you can have all these goals, and sometimes if you start looking at what you need to do daily, weekly, monthly, that compound interest might even push you past something that you even never thought was possible.
Yeah.
Right. And so I love that you said to make sure that the process, you didn't say fall in love with the process, but that's essentially what you meant.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And, I think it's also good to know that like it's not easy. It's going to take discipline. It takes hard work. You know, you mentioned the NBA. You know, I was a fan of Michael Jordan growing up, but not until I watched that documentary, and I'm blanking on the name of it right now.
The Last Dance.
The Last Dance, yes. Not until I watched that documentary did I realize like how intentional he was and how like hard working. And same thing with Kobe Bryant. You know, you hear about Kobe Bryant's work ethic. That guy was up at like 3 o'clock in the morning doing 2-hour block sessions multiple times a day. And so it's not like, and you look at any successful person in their field, it's not like they just sit back and do nothing. It takes work, right? It takes focus, it takes being intentional to get there.
Yeah, intentionality, intensity, focus. And I think also, I don't want to even think that we're getting off topic here because I think this is right on topic, but they have, what separates them is their why.
Yes.
Their why is stronger than other people's why. So like, there's no question that they're going to go do what they need to do, whether that's blocking off 2 hours, waking up at 3, not talking to this person because that person right now is not in alignment with their goals are. They don't let the distractions distract them.
Yeah.
You know, we're talking about the elites of all time, right? The Kobe Bryants and Michael Jordans, but we can learn from them, right? And we can implement that in our everyday lives and let that provide motivation and motivation, which is really temporary, but the discipline when you don't want to do it is what really sets you apart.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. I think you hit on something else really good there, which is, you know, being around people that are where you want to be, and also the flip side of that is kind of getting away from the situations where that's not where you want to be, right? You know, Michael Jordan was famous for, if you're on his team, you better bring your best, right? Or else he'd like kick you out of the practice.
Yeah.
Right? And so something like 7 in 10 people are broke, right? And so are you going to take advice from them, or are you going to take advice from somebody that's successful with their money, right? What are they doing? Just mimic it, right?
Mm-hmm. You become like the 5 people you spend the most time with. I mean, I don't know where that's from, but that's from somewhere that that a lot of people have heard it before, right?
Sure.
That kind of ties into a point you brought up earlier of the question is, you know, what is the percent of Americans living paycheck to paycheck? I think you said earlier it was 2 out of 3, so 66, was that 66, 67%?
Yeah.
And then my follow-up question to that, when we were kind of just talking about what we should discuss in the podcast, was just like, how can we stop that cycle, right? Like what can be done? Like what, in your experience, I mean, you've said it a little bit already, but what do you think, how can we stop the cycle of living paycheck to paycheck?
You know, I think going back to how investors have it so good right now, people in general have it great because you have so many resources at your fingertips, whether it's books, podcasts, you know, YouTube videos and such. If you're motivated to stop the cycle, you can more than find the help online, right? And through different resources. You don't have to pay for it. There's a lot of great, you know, information out there. And so I think it really comes down to, you know, people have to reach a point in their life where, like, you know, money affects everything that you're doing, and you have to reach a point where, like, I can't live like this anymore, right? And I think we focus a lot on the budgeting and spending less and all that. There's this whole other side, which is make more money, you know, get a side hustle, invest in yourself, do something that you can bring in more money, right? Especially if you're a spender, because that mentality is like less about being constricted and more about like, how do I get more abundance, right, coming in? And so think abundantly when it comes to your income as well. What can I do to make myself more valuable, to bring in more income, to help solve my problems?
Yeah, and I find that, I mean, in most instances, things don't happen by chance, they happen by change, right? And in addition to that, people also don't change until they're sick and tired of being sick and tired of their own stuff, right? So some of this conversation is, okay, it's going to be good information, but you have to reach a point where you're just done with what you've done, so you're ready to make that change, right?
Right.
Yeah. So what would be your advice, kind of transitioning into like the just how, because when someone comes to you, they want to figure out how to get rich. You're their bridge to a successful financial future. Yeah. So what would be your advice to someone who's looking to grow their money?
So I think we talked a little bit about first things first. Get yourself in a position where you can grow, which means don't have non-mortgage debt. So if you've got consumer type debt, whether it's car loans, credit cards, things like that are just eating your income, try to get rid of those first, right? Have an emergency fund. It's really like the boring thing, but it feels good, right? It's sort of like that first home ownership experience. Like, you can't really explain it until you've been there and you've had that experience. Same thing with an emergency fund. When you go from living paycheck to paycheck or drowning in debt to having a comfortable emergency fund, that feeling that you get is just amazing, right? And so that can put you in a good position to grow, because when you invest, it's not all sunshine and roses, and anybody that was invested in 2022 knows that. We had one of the biggest wealth wipeouts in history last year, and you've got to be able to weather those storms. So you need a good foundation to start from, right? And so once you have that foundation and you start adding regularly, and you just look for a good advisor to work with, or if you're doing it on your own, you try to learn enough to diversify, follow the basic principles. We always say good investing is boring investing, right? You're better off with a consistent lower number than an inconsistent all over the place. You could win the lotto, or you could be a zero.
Yeah, for sure.
Right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I love it. And as a realtor, I have to ask on behalf of all my clients and those that are looking to just keep the conversation around real estate. What advice do you have for first-time home buyers who are looking to take on their first mortgage?
Well, I think you want to kind of know what the mortgage person is looking for, right, or the lender, because you're going to go borrow the biggest amount of money that you probably ever borrowed before. So what are they looking for? And it's really pretty simple. It's like, if I was going to loan you money, what do I want to know about you? Where do you work? How long have you worked there? How much money do you make? How much money do you owe other people? If you owe all of our other friends money as well, I'm going to be like, well, I don't know, Jeff. Sure, yeah. Right? So, but knowing all these things can benefit you as a borrower, because the stronger borrower you are, the less money you're going to pay in interest, right? So you think about like less risk to the lender means less cost to you as the borrower. So a lot of these things, I think you're really putting yourself in a good position to go borrow money in an educated way. I would also not be as afraid, right? Mortgages are pretty highly regulated, especially since the 2008 crash. And so that lender doesn't want you to default. They don't want to take the house back. Anybody that's ever looked at a vacant home knows lenders don't want to get into that, right? They want you to be successful. They have a vested interest in you being successful. So, I think that people are usually ready before they think they're ready as well. So I would just encourage people to get started. Yeah.
Is there anything else that you feel like we haven't touched on? I mean, I think we hit on pretty much everything. I think ideally, kind of circling back, it's because I think this is a teachable moment for just the average person.
Yeah.
What can we do to make a home more affordable? Because at the end of the day, we're looking at these California prices. You throw in whatever interest rates the Fed wants to say we're going to have at the moment, and now you have that monthly payment, and it's like sticker shock on that payment. And so this is a big deal to me, because I have clients and just people that are interested in homes, and they look at a house, say, I don't want to give out numbers because these aren't going to be accurate, but if let's say it's $700,000 as a house, and their payment, actually let's not talk about numbers, but ideally is they're like, okay, this is my comfort level of my payment, and whatever that payment is this is how much house I can purchase, right? And let's just say if that payment was $1,000 cheaper, right, they would be able to afford it.
Yeah.
So the reason why you're here today and we're doing this conversation is the average American has $700 in car payments on average, $220 in credit card debt on average, and then we haven't even talked about student loans.
Yeah.
And so let's just say it's over $1,000. So you the principles you spoke about when it comes to getting rid of debt is the reason why I think this conversation is so important, right? Meeting with a financial advisor, talking to them about the things we've talked about and discussed today, essentially wiping out that $1,000 worth of debt, so that now that payment you said that looks scary, now you can potentially afford it. And what does that do to your purchasing power of the houses you now like?
Right.
Because I'm in a situation where the interest rates, oh my God, I don't like it, and as a realtor, I'm not really going to dive into their finances like that, right? So I think there's a team of people that can help you get to where you want to get to, and I think this is why any and everybody should reach out to Chris Sipes and really just dive into where they're at, because I see it all the time, daily. I don't like the houses in this payment bracket. My thing is, well, how can you make sure you're outside of that payment bracket into a overall house that you like?
Right.
And I think it's starting and diving into this and attacking the things that we discussed today, right? I appreciate it. I appreciate your time. What I think another question before we end here is like, if I go see Chris, how much is it going to cost me?
Right. Well, I think that's a great question, because my advice to anybody out there that would be interviewing any type of financial professional, somebody that's going to be dealing with your money, is you should always know how that person is getting compensated. And don't be afraid to ask. It's not a dumb question. It's a great question, because you want to make sure that their interests are at least somewhat aligned with yours, right? Because there's a lot of folks out there that call themselves financial advisors in different positions, right? And so, but in general, the way most people will work with an advisor is one of two ways: either through a retainer model, where they pay some sort of fee to get the advice that they're looking for. Maybe it's a project basis, maybe it's an ongoing relationship. And then the other way that's really common is that people pay a percentage of the money that they're directly investing with that advisor. So, the assets that are under our care, there'd be a percentage of that we're charging for the full financial planning, the tax planning, and the investment management. Okay. I think it's important for people to know, right? And there's probably a question if you don't get, you should get. Right? Yes.
And so I guess why I'm asking you is, hopefully it helps and supports someone having the confidence enough to ask whoever they're going to about what the payment looks like, right?
Yep. And I think it's a great question too, because a lot of people get discouraged. They think, well, I don't have $1 million to invest, so I can't work with a financial advisor. That's not true. There's a lot of great independent advisors out there. Look for a fiduciary, in my opinion, and you want to engage somebody that can help you with where you're at. And there's a lot of different options out there. So try not to get discouraged if you start shopping and you get one or two, hey, we only work with a certain level of client, because there are options out there.
Yeah. And I hate to circle back, but I'm going to circle back really briefly because of things. I know we're crunched on time here, but so we're talking about car payments, we're talking about credit card. I think there's some people out there that are like, well, Jeff, finances are my only option. So what do you want me to do? What would you tell them?
When you say finances?
Financing my car is my only option.
Oh, gotcha.
Like I don't have cash to put down to go pay a car in cash. So what else?
Sure.
This is the cards that I'm dealt. I got to I have to play the hand that I'm dealt.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I appreciate the advice. I appreciate the numbers, and I got to go get a car. I got to get from point A to point B. I have these kids in this school, and so.
Yeah.
In your experience, what's the advice that you give those people?
Yeah, that's a good, and that comes up, and I get it. Life happens, and sometimes you just got to meet. You got to meet things with where they're at, right, and come up with a plan to try to get around it. My favorite one is that side hustle, right? So, okay, I've got a payment now on this car. Well, what can I go do to find the offsetting cash flow to offset that? And honestly, sometimes it comes down to that hard work. Sometimes it comes down to that, you can't sit on the couch and just expect someone to pay you whatever your car payment is. You're going to have to go out and hustle for it, and that's going to mean sacrifices, right? And it may mean sacrificing time with your kids. But as a parent, I want my kids to look at me and say, Dad was a hard worker. Dad, took care of things, right? And not just also persistence, right? Bad things always happen to us, and they're always going to. right? If you're alive, bad things are going to happen to you.
Yeah.
So it's how you deal with it, right? And come out of it and make a plan to get around it, right?
Yeah, yeah. My college basketball coach, Pat Fiscaldo, he always used to say, you know, pain makes you. What did he say? I'm gonna butcher it. Pain makes you feel. Pain reminds you that you're alive, right? So whether that's physical, emotional, right, it's gonna happen. So essentially, he's like embrace it, and then make a plan to alleviate it, and work through it.
Yeah. And I think try not to beat yourself up about it too.
100%.
You know, my 2-year-old, he'll fall, and a lot of times he doesn't cry. He just gets up and goes because he doesn't think about it. He's not thinking, why did I fall? Why did this happen to me? Right? You know, a lot of times things just happen, and there's no control that we have over it. All we can control is how we react to it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember being 2, but me going back into a 2-year-old's shoes, I'm kind of used to being on the floor anyway, so I'm not going to cry because, boom, this is my element.
This is my element.
So, like, versus me 39, I'm like, man, I haven't been on the ground in a while, so my response is going to be a little bit different. But
absolutely.
But yeah, man, before we end here, I want to just end it on, you know, one, thank you for coming in. I really appreciate it. And I've also had the pleasure of listening to your podcast via YouTube. And so I just wanted to give you some time to just talk about that and what that looks like, what's it called, how long you've been doing it, and just let the audience know about it, because it's actually it's high level, right? A lot of numbers, little screens, so I'm trying to follow it, but it's good information. And I think it comes out consistently. I don't want to say once a week. I don't want to. I would just. What's the name of it? And can you give us a little insight on what that looks like?
Yeah, and thank you for having me too. I really appreciate it. Our podcast is nowhere near as professional as yours. We're working on that, but we do something called On the Economy once a week. We're rolling that out on Fridays this week. We were doing it on Tuesdays and Fridays last year. It's my business partner Darren Blonsky and I. We go through the different charts and things that are going on in the economy. It's you said high level. I would say it's in the weeds. Probably a little too in the weeds for a lot of folks that are not that interested in it. But if you're kind of nerdy, we use it really as kind of a way to just stay up on what's going on in the markets. What's gold doing? What are interest rates doing? What's real estate doing? Right? And so we use this hour a week to kind of research it and go through it. So if you want to check that out, it's on YouTube. We've got it's through SonomaWealthAdvisors.com is our website. So encourage people to listen in if they're interested.
I love it. And then lastly, I mean, how can they find you?
I think the website's probably the best place. That's SonomaWealthAdvisors.com. And we'll put our email in the show notes for folks that would like to reach out.
I love it. Thanks for your time, my friend. Always a pleasure to talk with you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.